Hi, Frank. Welcome to the show.
Hi, John. Pleasure to be with you.
It's a pleasure to have you. Now, you're over there in California, I understand?
I am, yes.
Kind of early in the morning for you.
8 a.m.
Okay. Some people would think that's early. There's a 4-hour difference between us. Now, you've written one book, and we'll be covering that. It's called SFC, A Poor Man's Battle. Sounds very interesting. Before we do that, though, Frank, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your backstory, where you come from, and how you got to the point of writing this particular book?
I grew up in a military family and grew up mostly in Aurora, Colorado. Went to college in Boulder, Colorado. My career has taken me a couple of different places, but most recently to California. I am an electrical engineer. My specialty is the electric power grid. That's primarily what I do is uh, engineering engineering endeavors
Hmm.
uh, and so forth.
Well, that must keep you busy over there in California, the power grid and all this.
It,
That's a pretty important thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
it very interesting topic as well.
Yeah. So, what is this book about exactly?
This book is about my parents. Their names are John and Hedy. John was grew up as a son of a sharecropper in the South, in the Panhandle of Florida and Texas, and served in World War II and in Vietnam. Hedy, on the other hand, was raised in Nazi Germany. She was the generation that was coming of age while the Third Reich was ruling Germany, and it's their story separately. And after they came together, how they married and moved on in life, and how they took what was a bumpy beginning and stabilized it. So it's a story of their lives mostly, and
Well,
what happened with them.
well, so your father was he was fighting in the war in the European theater of operations, and when it was all over, that's when he met your mother?
No, he was ended the war as a prisoner of war of the Germans.
Okay.
Returned to Texas, married a woman. Her name was Verna May. Uh, John and Verna May had a son, and the birth date of that son was when he and Verna May both passed away. And that caused John to re-enlist in the army. And he was returned to Germany, and that's when he met my mother.
Okay. Right, because Germany by this point was West Germany and East Germany was split, right?
Correct.
So the Americans still have soldiers, military position there to this day.
They do, yes.
Yeah. What does SFC stand for?
SFC is Sergeant First Class. That is the highest rank that my father achieved in the Army. And that was his rank when he retired in 1969. Um, and if I might, a poor man's battle is a follow-on to the idea that people say it's a rich man's war and a poor man's battle, um, meaning that it's those of the lower class that will go fight wars that richer people start. It was a motto throughout his family, and I felt like it applied to him. He came from a modest beginning uh, to work his way through to middle class.
Yeah. Now he was conscripted, I suppose, being World War II, there was conscription.
Right. Yeah, he avoided conscription in for several years, but when his time came up, yeah, he was conscripted.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing than a voluntary army like what we have now. But
Right.
still, it can be viewed as a poor man's battle because some people who volunteer for the military, and it's good that they serve their country, It's usually because they need a job. Do you see it that way as well?
Um, the first time he entered the army, he didn't need that job, but the second time was following the death of his wife and son. He entered a period of aimlessness. He was unemployed. It was a dark time for him, and um, his last option was to reenlist in the army. And so that, yes, the second time he needed the army.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. This book is a little over 300 pages. I know what that feels like. It's a fairly good read. How long did it take for you to write it?
5 years. Yeah, it's a long time, and partly because I'm not experienced in writing books. Um, but the story was also not known to me. My parents never shared the story, which was part of the reason I wanted to write it. After my mother's death, um, I was sitting with my brother and my sister in my mother's house, and I was looking through. I'm reaching over because there was a magazine rack on the side of the chair that I was sitting. I was looking through it, and out fell a baggie of letters she kept,
Wow.
and there were letters there from her fiancé, um, letters that she kept from my father had an affair at one point, but she kept the letters that the woman wrote to my father.
Mm,
And there was one other letter in there, and it just stitched together so many things that I'd heard through the years, but had not known for certain.
right.
And especially the letters from Freddie. Freddie Deubler was her fiance, and he served in the German Wehrmacht, was sent to the Eastern Front, and he never returned.
Yeah.
No one knows what happened to him. Uh, but we as a family, when we would go to Germany, we would stay with the Deubler family.
Hmm.
The people who were had been his parents, and even his brother. After the parents passed away, we stayed with the Deublers, and I couldn't figure out what the backstory was with the
Yeah.
Deublers.
Right.
And both my parents did not reveal that, even when directly asked, what are these people to us? Why do they treat us so well? Why do they let
Hmm.
us stay in their home? All my mother would say was, well, they were just friends in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Um, so she kept that from us, and the letters revealed it,
Wow.
exposed it all. So the book is largely based on those letters.
Were you able to speak to your father and to get some information about, particularly about him being in the military and what he saw, if that's part of the book as well?
It is so. Couple questions there. So a couple things come to mind. So the organization of the book is, first there's a chapter by my father, and I write it in as though I'm him, um, and then a chapter by my mother, and they alternate more or less with a couple of others sprinkled in. But it's an alternating walk through the 20th century, first by my father, then my mother. My father, um, he was a little more open about World War II. I remember the day that I found out he had been a POW.
Hmm.
We were sitting in the yard of the Deublers in Germany, and uh, somehow it came out that he'd been a POW, and I just said, "Dad, tell me about this." And he just said, "I didn't do much. I he didn't reveal anything, although my research with military affairs revealed that he'd won a Bronze Star. I had his Bronze Star, and the letter that justified that Bronze Star. So he retained a lot of information, didn't tell us much about it. And then for Vietnam, I knew almost nothing about Vietnam. Um,
Okay. Oh, so
luckily,
your father was in Vietnam as well?
he was a young man in World War II
Yep.
and then an older veteran in Vietnam.
Wow.
Yes. And
Wow.
if I may jump in for a second, John. So I didn't know anything about Vietnam, but luckily I found online a gentleman that served with him, and so it was through Sergeant First Class Jim Evans that I was able to get some backstory about Vietnam. It was revealing, and I consider Jim Evans a friend at this point. So very helpful.
Hmm.
I wouldn't have known anything without him.
Yeah. Wow. Very interesting. What what made you write the book? Is something you needed to get out, something you needed to express and get over with?
One of the big motivations was I, I had a sense that Verna May, my father's first wife, their son, and on my mother's side, Freddie, were going to be sort of orphaned out there in history. No footprint.
Yeah.
Uh, and I wanted them to have a footprint.
Mm.
And I also kind of have a sense that I'm trying to honor my parents, but in giving them that honor, I also brought in a couple of the missteps that they had. My mother being in the Hitler Youth, um, my father having an affair. Things like that are. I mean, they're not perfect. They're human beings.
Sure.
But so in writing their story, that is part of their story.
Hmm.
So uh, yeah,
Okay. All right.
that's what I was trying to do.
I just want to clarify this because I come from a family from the other side, yet I call the Allies the Allies. We're German Hungarians. So my parents lived through the war, but by being over there. And so I just want to mention something about the Hitler Youth. There really are two Hitler Youths. There's the kind that was compulsory, it was part of your education, and there was classes you took to admire Hitler and write letters to Hitler. There's all kinds of silly, goofy things that they made the kids do. But that's not the same Hitler Youth that went on to take it on as an extracurricular activity and pick up weapons. And a lot of those Hitler Youth defended Berlin to the last moment. That's a different Hitler Youth. So I just want to clarify that for the viewers that my father was a Hitler Youth, but it wasn't because he liked Hitler. It's just something they have to do.
Right. That's a good point. I should note that my grandfather, who I did not know, uh, and the Deubler's father were both sent to labor camps, and had lost. My father lost his job and was
Mm.
accused of being a communist.
Yes.
Jakob Deubler was Freddie's father. He was sent to a labor camp for teaching Jewish children to gymnastics to
Yeah.
Jewish children.
It didn't take much, to upset the Nazis. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm looking at the cover right now. It says there, a fictional novel. Now, I've actually spoken to a few authors recently who have written fictional novels. What's your explanation on that?
Well, I have most of the backstory and documentation for the backstory, but I don't have all of it. So I filled in gaps. I interpolated and I extrapolated to fill in some of the gaps that I did not have.
Hmm.
For instance, Freddie has a chapter in the book, my mother's fiancé. Um, I don't know where he went and what he did, but I do know that he sent a radio, a Hungarian radio that I had always been told was built by my grandfather. And Well, I'm an engineer now. I can look into the back of that radio and see that this was probably not built by a layperson. And after a little research, I got with the California Historical Radio Society, and they found out that the radio was mass produced in Hungary in 1944. That was a revelation to me.
Wow,
And the only person that it could have been going through Hungary in 1944 was Freddie, the fiance of my
yeah,
mother.
of course.
So I stitched that in, built built some fiction around it because no one knows what happened to Freddie. No one knows exactly where he was. We have the letters, we have the radio. That's about it.
Hmm.
So there is some fiction, plausible fiction, but it's fiction.
I'm sure it is. My mother was in Hungary at the time. She was a child, and it was a battleground. You know, if it wasn't the Germans, then it was the Russians. And 44, that was a rough time for a German military. I mean, the Russians were gaining on them, and they were just retreating. So
Yeah,
I think I
that's
know
that
what
pretty much
happened.
chapter is Freddie in retreat.
Yeah, yeah, it's obvious what happened. I'm sorry. Okay. Do you have any plans to write any more books, or is this a one-off?
At this moment in time, it's a one-off. But I I'm finding I'm circulating around more and more authors, and I'm finding that well, uh, maybe there's a path forward there in some way. So I'm searching, I'm probing. I did enjoy as much as it gets tedious to write here and there.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a satisfaction
Yes.
in doing it as well, and so I'm very proud of the book. Those that have purchased it and they've given me positive feedback. I'm looking for a path forward. I don't know what it is right now,
Yeah.
but
Well, I asked that
I'm
question because I know what it's like to write the first book, and then you go, "Wow, that was," you put it right. It was tedious, and there are days you just really don't feel like doing it, and then you get into it, and then it's finally done, and it's almost like, well, I want to do another one, but I'm not too sure what it is. And yeah, it's a great feeling. Mm. Your book cover, that's obviously your parents.
it is.
It's very nice. And I was going to ask who designed it. I guess it was your choice to have that picture. Did you go through like a hybrid publisher? Or did you have people working with you as a team?
I did have a publisher that designed that cover. He asked for some photographs, and yeah, he put that together. He chose
Mhm.
that. I gave the thumbs up.
Yeah, it's great. Now, being that this is a story about your parents and you're very close to that, what was the editing process like when notes started coming back and you had to change things, obviously, to make it better? Well, how did that make you feel?
Deflated at first, uh, but also knowing that it was correct. When I get tired, I don't write well. Um, I think that's everybody, but I
Sure.
mean, it happened to me certainly. I fatigued easily, and one of the so my wife helped a lot. So
Okay.
my wife knows the story, learned of the backstory while I was learning about it. So she read through it several times, and pointed things out, pointed out where I was repetitive, and so she was the first line of defense.
Okay. Now, I take it you were born somewhere between the mid 50s and late 50s. We mentioned earlier we're similar in age. What was it like growing up in that family with your father? I imagine was absent a lot of times.
Um, yeah, uh, it's interesting you asked that. I got used to him being away. Um, the period of Vietnam, um, he was just away. He was in Vietnam for a while. We had a photograph of him inoculating a young Vietnamese child that we kept at the front door. And we got used to him being away. And when he came back from Vietnam, the feud between my parents regarding where we were going to live had culminated. And it resulted in my father having to serve an extra year and a half away in Fort Benning, Georgia. So he was not just away for Vietnam, he was also away for that additional year and a half in Fort Benning, Georgia. And I was went from 10 years old to being 14 years old at that point. I got used to him being away. So it was new when he came back and was part of the family. It was new having him there. And that was followed up very shortly by him having an affair. So it was messy. It just got.
Yeah, yeah. I'd like to do something now with this season 3 that we're into. I asked the author if they would like to give a pitch to the viewing audience. We've heard about the book. Now maybe you can try and sell some people on why they should buy it. Or you want to do that?
I'd like to do that. Yes.
All right, then go for it.
So if you're looking for something that is educational and entertaining and historical, please consider SFC, A Poor Man's Battle, and enjoy the read. There's a lot there. It's both an uncommon story in some ways, and yet a common story in many other ways. All of our generation is different because of the events of World War II. And I highly recommend SFC, A Poor Man's Battle by Frank McElvain.
Excellent. Yes, I agree. Where we are right now is a direct result of what happened and how World War II wrapped itself up. And I try and tell that to people as often as I can. But young people, not just young people, even people my age, not entirely sure what I mean by that. So I'm glad you said that. Good. Very good. It was a pleasure having you on, Frank, and I look forward to knowing more about this book and anything else you write. If you do come up with something, you let me know. We'll have you back on the show.
Wonderful, John. Thank you very much.
You take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for watching. If you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then please consider hitting that like button and leaving a comment. You can also subscribe and ring that bell because I release 2 episodes per week, one on Wednesdays and one on Saturdays. And if you are an author, I would love to hear from you. Until such time, keep on writing and be kind to one another.